I'm Dr. Kelly Brogan. You may know me as a New York Times bestselling author of a book with an exploding pill on the cover, renegade psychiatrist, pole dancer, or honorary member of the Disinformation Dozen. What can I say? I'm a born provocateur. I've spent most of my recent life exposing deceptions, connecting dots, and discovering the secret places my inner victim is still waiting to be liberated. And now I feel called to help you reclaim all of your parts, your health, your sexuality, your power, and your expression, so that you can finally truly own yourself. I want to ignite in you that inner knowing and the pulsing vitality that lives beneath your disempowerment, disconnection, and resentment, so that you can audaciously, courageously, and playfully alchemize your struggle into the specific pleasure of who you are. This is Reclamation Radio. Hi, and welcome back to Reclamation Radio. I am Dr. Kelly Brogan. And what I love about my containers is that the women I attract always have some audacious questions to ask me. So it's my intention for the musings that I share on these topics to grow the permission field of what's possible, and also to offer relatable reframes that can jailbreak you from your victim stories. So you might notice that I'm a bit more familiar and free when I'm answering these questions in our private spaces. So take a listen, and I hope you'll take the opportunity to submit your questions to me in my membership Vital Life Project. I got this question from Francesca. Do you have any suggestions for how to play with narrating our experiences to ourselves in ways that empower us as opposed to playing the same loops? The most important premise is to narrate from a place of choice and responsibility, which actually means this is happening because I want it to happen, because I'm choosing for it to happen. Why might I be doing that? Right? So I wrote in Own Yourself that suffering ends where meaning begins. How can you meaning make? And you can do this in seconds. I mean, it becomes something you can do very rapidly. Why might this be happening? Right? That's called recruiting curiosity, right? Rather than certainty about your victimization. So you're recruiting curiosity. Why might this be happening? And you are in a state of knowing that it's for you. So the kinds of sentences that you say from that place are most likely going to start with the word I, right? Not this or you, whatever. The focus is like you're so fascinated by how it is that your internal makeup manifested on the outside in this way that your sentence would never start with, can you believe he, or you did this? You know, I hated that you did this. Not that you would say that, but you know, it's a focus not out there. Is a focus in here. And as you connect those dots, there are ways that you can look at your list of things. Like, let's say you have a list of things you want to experience that you imagine you're going to experience when you have the things you want to have, right? The man, the money, the house, the baby, whatever it is, the woman, I don't know, the partner. How is it that this thing you hate that happened has actually offered you what it is that you think only comes from having the thing that you want, right? So remember that example of like, you know, feeling regarded, feeling adored, feeling magnetic, feeling, you know, like my openness reflected by this like unwanted advance or whatever you want to call it, you know, on the part of this, you know, this gentleman who normally interact with in a professional capacity. How can I identify that there are elements, just elements in this that are exactly what I say that I want? Could be attention, you know, could be something exciting, you know, happening instead of nothing happening. It could be the opportunity to assert yourself. There's all sorts of dimensions in the unwanted thing that are ready for you to pick. So explore that. And then you would speak from a place of like, I mean, what I sort of in my mind say is like, wow, I created this. Like, this is so funny that I created this, or I created this thing. And it must be because I want to experience this X, Y, and Z. And if you want to take it into advanced practice, you will begin to explore what it is that you can get out of this situation, circumstance that literally would never be available otherwise. Like not in a way you can imagine. And without getting into like a whole tale, and, you know, I'll watch myself for how I tell this tale because it's pretty dramatic. In 2020, I became like an overnight vegetarian. adopted animals and chickens and had an unexpected, sort of divergence from what had been a very committed ancestral diet, lots of red meat, kind of a path. And I was very, very strict about it. Like to the extent that, I was like, I'd spit out a piece of like chicken that ended up somehow on my plate in Mexico or what I like literally spit it out. And it became almost like a superstitious thing. Like I could not have the energy of these like harmed animals in my system. Like no way, no how. And I rationalized, that I have done enough work, so to speak, that have gotten myself to a place where I no longer need to borrow the prana of these animals, whether it's adrenochrome or otherwise. And I did when I was sick, right? And I have watched, red meat. The VMR diet is red meat several times a day, right? I have watched that heal people, thousands of people. I know that diet works, okay? So maybe it is that sick people need, quote unquote, I put that in quotes, need to eat that way. And then maybe as you integrate, you can become a breatharian at some point, right? I don't know. I came up with that sort of like theory about it. And long, dramatic tale short, I did this water fast last year, which some of you, if you've been in the sovereignty series, you might have seen me talk about. It was a very deep spiritual experience. My motivation for doing so was really from an energy of like proving that I could do it, like this immature masculine energy, like sort of spiritual thrill seeking. And like the same reason I was going to do a dark room retreat this year too. Anyway, so it was really intense. I lost like 17 pounds in 9 days. And the moment I started eating again, I developed like digestive symptoms that I've never had in my life, like bloating and just pain, like stuff I literally, even when I was like full blown eating McDonald's, Hashimoto's diagnosis, didn't have this. So that's interesting. And then I needed eyeglasses for the first time ever. Maybe coincidence. Developed like bilateral knee pain, which is like challenging to dance with, So that was something that was really on my mind. And then I gained not only the 17 pounds back, but like another 18 pounds. And I've been the same size since I was 17. So I knew that something was like, my system was like perceiving that as like ongoing starvation. Like it was really potentially regrettable. And I don't regret pretty much anything because I have this practice of seeing that it had to be this way. It had to be this way. And I look back on the water fast and I was like, maybe it didn't have to be this way. Like, oops. So anyway, a year goes by and I'm like spending this year attempting to explore ways to re-regulate myself. Okay. So here's the part of the story where I look at what happened and I'm like, it needed to be this way. Okay. I move into this house and I start to have an issue. So I have chickens, right? So when you have chickens, if you do, you know that like sometimes rats can be a thing, right? So I start to have an issue with rats, not in the house, but in like the rafters, like in the walls, right? And recruiting help for this, like confirmed so many of my stories about like, oh, my situation is so complicated. Like nobody can even help me. Got into like this like financial dispute. It was like a very dramatic time. Okay. And I didn't want to kill the rats. So I decided to like psychically communicate with them and tell them, this is my place, get out, like get out. And I did that like pretty regularly for, 2 months. Meanwhile, like every night, my daughters and I are like up listening to them, like literally run around. And I attempted to like, use like mesh through this company to like seal off areas of the house or whatever, where they thought they were getting in. It didn't work at all. And I got to the place where I found my fuck no. Okay. So I went from the guilt-induced, I believe, merger with these animals where I felt like, you know what, it's okay. You can be here. Like, it's whatever. At least you're not in the house. Like that energy of, which also shows up as the caretaker, the rescuer, right? Like that energy of enmeshment that is fueled by a sense of like, I owe the animal kingdom something for all the animals I've eaten my whole life, kind of a thing. I came to this rupture where I was like, we're not connected. Like, you're not listening to me. I'm telling you to go. And I became angry. And from that place, I decided, I hired like a dude off of Craigslist, just like a guy. And I decided that I was going to place a trap. Okay. I did that. And it actually was on the roof, not even in my house. And my girlfriend was actually staying over and it went off in the middle of the night. And it was one of the more horrific experiences, just like like gruesome. Okay. Like the actual like cartoon, like screaming, like it was not okay. And maybe I'm doing that thing I'm doing where I'm trying to induce in you how not okay it was in your system because I can't handle it in mine. It was very, very like scary. And there was like banging around for a long time. Anyway, so I cried for a long time, went into this like deep practice of like exploring my pre-existing guilt about a million things in my life. Cause I've explored shame a lot, but not so much guilt. That was interesting. And, my girlfriend was like, guilt is just the unwillingness to feel another's pain that you have decided you've caused. And I was like, wow, that's very deep. So I got to this place where because now I've pierced the veil of harming animals, right? I didn't do it directly, but I participated in the murder of this animal. Okay. Undeniably. Now I was back in contact with the part of me that is willing to harm animals for my own benefit. Perhaps riding the belief that when I get what I want, others are harmed, right? So I'm always interested in like the meta programs that are being exposed through my experience. So because I made contact with that part again, I no longer could live in the delicious virtue of being this like clean and clear vessel, right? Not participating in the harm of these beloved creatures any longer. And because of that, I decided that I was going to do VMR again. After 15 years, I was going to do my own program because I know that that's actually what healed me and it will again. I know that it will. And I just knew that all of this had happened to get me to a place of resolving dogma and rigidity around my newfound vegetarianism. And trust me, every day, so I'm like probably 2 weeks in to the diet, and every single day, I look forward to when I can be vegetarian again. And I say can because what I mean by that is, I already feel better. I already feel different. My body is already different. Like I danced this weekend. I was like, oh my God, I'm like in a new body, so much stronger and just, back online. And I intend to progress in that direction again, because it's what I want and I will have what I want. So that rat scenario needed to go down exactly like that. How could I be like, oh, so annoying. I wish it didn't happen. It's so gross. Like, why are they in my house? No, it needed to happen exactly like that to close a loop in my own process, maybe even bring me to an expanded place, level me up, stabilize me so that I can go where I needed to go. And I wasn't going to get there because of choices that I had made. So that's how, you can condition yourself to look at the shitty things. There will be a reveal of like, oh my God, this is why. I had that like very difficult relationship. This is why, I went through that window of, my kid telling me they hate me. This is why my car ran out of gas on the highway, and as you practice that curiosity and the assumption that you created this for a reason. I mean, this is why, like, people tell me that I like shame victims or whatever, because nobody wants to, especially when it comes to this, so-called mental illness, nobody wants to rest into the possibility that their needs are being met through their struggle, right? And that this is actually what they want. The last thing you want to hear from a friend, like when you're in it, is like, oh, why are you creating this? Being with the part of you that hates it, that wants it to stop, is also essential. You don't want to coerce that part into like spiritualizing the meaning of it. So being with that part, but not narrating from that part, not sharing from that part. You're like the parent for that part, right? You're taking care of that part. You're not going to like give her the microphone. That doesn't make any sense. You're here for her, right? And then you are the one who is at the helm, deciding when it's time for silence, when it's time for narration, and how the narration is going to reflect really well on you, right? Omrapani, one of my teachers, says to women that it's really important for them to speak about their ex-partners in a way that aggrandizes the woman, right? Like every single man I've ever been with has treated me like a queen. That's actually true. Like for me personally, that's actually true. And it's also true, that there have been many layers of dysfunction and unfulfilling connection and thwarted intimacy and, even abuse, right? That's also true. But when I narrate from that place and I speak about my romantic history, not like, oh, the toxic thing I'm getting over and the narcissist that. And when I speak from a place of, I've had legendary romances in my life, I get to be that woman. right? I am that woman then who has legendary romances. Like, fuck yes, yes, I want to be that woman. I don't want to be the woman who attracts dysfunctional partners who treat me like shit and over and over again in my pattern. Like, the fetishizing of the narcissistic codependent dynamic on social media and in so much of the sort of shadow of our trauma focus and awareness when it comes to, pop psychology and self-help does not serve our empowerment. Absolutely does not. It might feel good to watch a video about like how to get over your narcissistic ex, but there's also videos that say like every single woman right now has a narcissistic ex, right? So like there's something to how we are sourcing energy through these stories. And, you probably know the phrase loose ritual that I like to reference because that's what it is. When you're in your victim, you need to induce that in other people so that they feel the thing you feel, and then the energy is propagated. Whereas when like you got your shit on lock, like you tell people you don't, or you share from a full cup, and somebody could be like, "Oh, that's cool," or like, "Oh my God, that's amazing," and it doesn't matter, right? You don't have that parasitic dynamic with the response and reaction on the part of the people in your life that you're sharing with. Here's another question on the topic of reframing thoughts from Renee. What are some examples of how one can discharge the need to be heard through a story that may sound like a whine, a complaint, or victim-y? For example, I got in a bicycle accident and it was pretty bad, and I would explain my need to be tender with my body to my husband and son. Is it being in complaint to speak of my accident to remind them of my need for tenderness? So first of all, my intention is not to make all of us, myself included, like feel scrutinized under a microscope and in constant surveillance and judgment of whether or not we're doing the thing right. That's just placing the virtue somewhere else. That's not the idea. So remember that the primary commitment is to being with yourself in your experience, aligning with yourself and why it is that this is happening, why it is that you might want this to be happening. That's the goal, right? So the goal is not to get an A+ on speaking without victim-y language. And again, I say that to myself too. It's just that when we do that, we think it feels good, but it's like licking an ice cream when you're thirsty for water. It definitely does not feel as good as the practiced attunement to like, I accept that this happened and I am moving from that place of like, this sucks to understand, a better why I want what I do because of it. Right. So what I hear is in this example, you discovered that being tender with your body, that's like very special language, right? So you're not even saying like, I want to take it easy or I want to be careful. It's like you want to be tender with your body, right? So there is a reason that this accident afforded you the awareness of that desire, which was I would argue, pre-existing, right? That desire to be tender. What is it to be tender with your body? Well, if you have a husband, I imagine you would like for him to be like tender with your body, right? To touch you in a very attuned way, to read what your body needs and provide exactly that kind of contact. The best way to secure that in dynamic is to offer it to yourself. Would you have done that, offered that to yourself without, this opportunity? Would you know to even ask for that, from others without this opportunity? Maybe not. I think that's a lot of why we have accidents and get quote unquote sick acutely, is so that we have an opportunity to claim what it is that we don't feel entitled to ask for otherwise from ourselves or other people, which is attention and caretaking. So that's beautiful. I mean, that to me, that's like you're already in the space of like, here's what I want because of this, and I'm aware of it, and I'm going to ask for it. Modeling that for your children, I don't know that there's anything more important than that. That they see, here is what mama needs for self-care, and she knows how to ask for it, and not in a way that's necessarily, of course, like attached to it being delivered, right? Like, again, you could get into more sophisticated asks. Like I would feel really supported. And like I had this moment to just be gentle with myself. If you all would remember, that I don't want to be taking out the garbage, or I don't want, get specific about what it is that you want, what it is that you're asking for. Are you willing to do that for me? Right. So I think that is a perfect example, actually, of how it is that you are not focused on the unsolvable problem that has been presented to you. You're focused on what it is that you want. And now you know that you probably want already before, thanks to this like seemingly unwanted thing happening, right? Okay, so let's see. I will take one more. For a few years now, I've been using a flower remedy set by Lotus Way called Sacred Awareness. I use the mist on my face, the oil as a perfume. It smells so good, and the elixir in my matcha. You may have heard me speaking about how I've been maturing my inner caretaker, rescuer, and savior, and really seeing the shadow in my desire to change the world and be the perfect holistic mama. With the support of this remedy set, I've seen deep changes and liberation from controlling, anxious, martyry energy inside of me, and permission to be a different kind of activist. So if you're curious about what remedy could subtly and powerfully shift you into deeper, more coherent energetic states, head to lotusway.com and use the code Kelly15 for 15% off. The link is in show notes for you. And one more from Mariah. I am struggling with cynicism and pessimism about the future generally. How do you deal with knowing about world events and maintaining a positive outlook regarding the future that doesn't feel forced or in denial? This is the ultimate question, and one that I think, the shifts that I've undergone, I would say in the past year and a half, I'm going to respond in a way that is like informed by my personal process, because I know that the answer to your question universally is you orient to the present, your lived environment. Right. So I remember in peak pandemic, sort of root chakra destabilization, I recognized that if I actually orient, this is a somatic experience, like Peter Levine thing, right? Like if I actually orient, meaning like I take like engaged notice of my environment, I look around the room. I like to notice something beautiful because it helps me to actually like really tune in and not like think about something else while I'm doing it. So I look around and I orient to exactly where I am. I move my eyeballs in their sockets, right? I am in a space where I'm actually physically safe and everything is okay. That may not always be the case. However, in this moment and in most moments that I found myself moving in to this metaphysical space of terror, nihilism, of, contact with death and destruction, right? When I found myself moving into that space, I would orient to the present and remind myself that right here, right now, I'm okay. I'm okay. Because what I've learned about what's going on in the world, right? When you feel the need to share something like that, it's because you need to discharge. This is what I think. It's because you need to discharge the negative sensations and fear inside of yourself and induce it in somebody else that you can share a field, so that you can commiserate. So this consciousness, it's like it needs to be fed, right? It needs to be fed. Versus like a sovereign consciousness, which is like, I'm doing me, I'm living my life. And if you like it, great. Like my cup runneth over, enjoy, like whatever comes your way. And if you ask me, I'll share. This is very different. It's like, here is like a hot potato of negative energy. So one of the ways that we can, maybe the cardinal way that we can evolve and alchemize this phenomenon is, even for moments, like allow the buck to stop with you. So when you encounter something horrible that's going on out there, what they are doing, the anonymous they are doing, right? And maybe you take a moment, you orient around, you recognize that there's no they, it's all individuals, right? So you're just going to interact with the individuals you need to interact with and make your choices. But you still have this feeling like, wow, we incarnated in a really fucked up place, And I don't know, I told some of you in a previous call that I read this book called Exit the Cave, and it's pretty dystopian, right? Like it's like we're trapped in this realm and it's a realm of suffering and death and destruction. Just look around, look at the animals killing every other animal and, Do we even know anybody who's actually happy? And we're all pretending that life is beautiful, but it's actually just, a struggle, and then you die kind of a thing. And then you go into the white light. So you're recycled, right? So like that kind of thing, right? So we can get into this place, and whatever comes of that nihilistic existential angst, especially if you have children, like this sense of like, what is happening here? Like, why am I here? This is a mess. It's getting worse. And look what they're up to. And they're just getting started. And, I'm going to be in a gulag in a year and, watching everyone I love, be dismembered in front of me. Like, I don't know what. You can hold whatever comes up inside of you in your body. You can handle it. I know it. Right. So you would take 90 seconds, maybe a minute, and you would sit with the storyless sensations in your body. If it's too intense and you go right up into your mind, which is what I tend to do, you can pendulate. So you can spend 10 seconds of your totally focused laser beam awareness on the sensation in your body that comes up. You stay with that sensation, and then you find another place in your body that's totally neutral, and you move to that place, and you go back and forth about 3 rounds. That's it. And it will shift. It will shift in that time. And then you can begin to really assess your behavioral choices, right? So part of the efficacy of news media is the way in which there is a learned helplessness. That's a psychological term that is induced. There is an experience of futility. That is an essential ingredient in population control. And it's real futility. Like the likelihood is there's actually also, because there are like pretty much no trustworthy charities, like there's very little you can do about the anonymous victim. So how do you assess your choices and what behavioral action you can take in your lived experience? I think the most powerful action you can take, I call it, remember, enter through the upset, to do exactly what I just said. And you take these moments to grow your capacity to hold without needing to pass the potato, without needing to grow the field, without contributing. This is what I did as an activist for 10 years. This is why I don't post this information any longer. I don't feel that it is my highest expression to fearmonger around what's wrong in the world. And the last gasp for me was a thank you body rally, right? Because I shifted and I said, listen, if I'm going to do anything, I'm going to disrupt in a positivistic way, because otherwise I am perpetuating that victim consciousness that says, you out there should be doing different things than what you're doing. Like, I don't have control over that. I have control over literally no one else but my behavioral choices. And I have plenty to clean up right here. Like, endless amounts of shit to clean up in my lane every day, in my real relationships, in my real, self-allegiance, in my experience of my lifestyle choices, right? If I stay focused here, if I tune this instrument, then my intuition is going to be on fleek, and I'm going to know exactly what to do, exactly when to do it. Doesn't that sound good? That's actually why I stopped drinking, like at all socially, was because I am very, very interested in having like superpower level intuition. And I have noticed that there's even more available. And I know some of you out there are, my best friend is clairvoyant, right? Have tapped into these gifts, right? The long and short to your question, Denise, is sit with the feeling. Just be with the feeling. Be curious about it, right? Be curious about the sensation and grow your capacity to sit with it. Because the story that you're telling about the world right now is the same story that I'm telling. And it's the story of shattered innocence, right? It's the story of the fall, right? It is the story of our broken childhoods, right? It's an old story, and it just happens to be taking this particular shape in this particular moment. And that's why one of the most powerful things you can do is to simply not take the bait of imagining that this horrible, bad thing is happening to you in your powerless, helpless, and dependent state, because it's not true. So when you orient to the here and now, you will begin to perceive the choices that you actually have and to develop mastery in the realm of choice making. because that will confer the sense of safety. And from that sense of safety will come the capacity to observe what is beautiful, what is perfect. Like the Buddha's smile of, I couldn't have possibly designed this better. Like, this is really extraordinary. And the knowing that you could be playing any of the characters involved. You're not actually superior to anybody else, including the so-called bad guys, even if they're not even humans. Like, whatever. They're figments in our personal, projection, not to get too metaphysical about it, but the humility that we can access when we orient to the here and now, and we recognize that we only are responsible for what's in our immediate environment and our real relationships and our lived life, cleaning that up is very empowering. And through that experience, your system, it's called neuroception, right? Your system will allow you to accurately perceive what is in front of you, because there's immense beauty in front of all of us. I mean, literally, like, I can look at my hand and be mesmerized for hours, right? I'm just my own human body is a masterpiece, and let alone like my kitties in front of me and like the color of pink on my couch and like the light coming through the leaves, and right. So we can't perceive that. That's like, I talk about, like, if there's a pile of laundry on the chair and you're seeing like an intruder in your room at night, you're going to respond, right? And you're going to freak out. But if you can accurately perceive that it's just a freaking pile of laundry, like, you can stay with yourself and not self-abandon. To accurately perceive, you have to confer safety to your system. And it's very accessible to do that. So orientation, enter through the upset and feel the feelings, and really assess whether there are any choices or behavioral actions that you can engage, like, in your lived life. So people love to ask me questions, and I love to ask questions of others, because inquiry is play. But some of my interviews and answers are too hot to handle for Reclamation Radio. So in my membership Vital Life project, I have created a private podcast that gets delivered to wherever you listen to podcasts, where I answer your questions that arise because of my provocative subject matter. And I also share interviews that might otherwise be censored that I call the Sovereignty Series. So you'll get access to these private podcasts and a private chat by joining my membership Vital Life Project. I'll see you in there.